Welcome to February. It's hard to believe it's already February.
I know, it's flying by.
It tends to do that on us. But I have invited Sarah Fotopoulos back again this month with me. Sarah taught last month with us as we really dug deep into the topic of mercy. Mm-hmm. And it was a lesson that challenged me to write. It was a lesson that challenged me to deliver with you, and one that very much challenged me again last month to listen to and discuss with our chapter. So thank you.
No, thank you.
For that wisdom, for that insight. But I wanted to invite Sarah back specifically. A lot of times we kind of try to break up who teaches every month, but mercy and kindness are so similar that they're often confused. And so I really felt like it was good for you and I to kind of continue this discussion and really help our LeadHers around the country differentiate between the difference of kindness and mercy and how we're called to wear them both differently.
Sounds good.
So I wanted to start off, this whole year we're really talking about the wardrobe of a LeadHer. You'll notice we all wear different things every day. Some of us wear a business suit, some of us wear scrubs, some of us are, wearing shirts covered in slobber and drool. It just kind of depends on what your uniform is. But no matter what your daily uniform is, God calls us all in Colossians to put on the uniform of God, the wardrobe of a LeadHer. And so all year, we're breaking down these different characteristics. This month, we're talking about kindness. And I found this quote, which I thought was really interesting. This is by a fashion designing expert out of Great Britain. Okay, and she said, "Fashion is a language which tells a story about the person who wears it. Clothes can create a wordless means of communication that we all understand."
Absolutely.
And I thought that was interesting because I think in our culture, in our society, you can really tell a lot about a person simply by the way they choose to dress and portray themselves. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes just even the colors that we choose have a lot to say about how we're feeling, or if I know when I'm not feeling good for some reason, either physically or I'm just really tired or I'm cranky, then I want to go with things that feel nice against my skin, and I'm not so much worried how they look as how they feel.
Right, and so I think it's interesting in the fact that, we're kind of talking about this theme of fashion this year, but just like fashion can express without words your character, I think our kindness expresses oftentimes just as much about our character, our Christian character, really. Kindness kind of becomes that same outward expression, just like fashion can be kind of that outward expression of ourselves.
I think that's one of the things that sets us apart because, that's unfortunately not very common in our society. If something goes wrong, then we're yelling at somebody else, even if that's not their fault. I mean, you ask people who work in public service and retail, the checker at the grocery store, the waitress at the restaurant, it's not her fault that your order was wrong, but she's the one that gets the brunt of it. So I think when we act out of character of the world, it's one of those things that truly sets us apart. And, the Bible tells us we'll be known by our love, and kindness starts with love. It has to be motivated by love, the love we receive from God, and then because of that, the love that we're motivated to show to others.
I had made a note to myself, this whole topic of kindness, again, really challenged me this month. And I think one of the reasons that this challenges me so much is because a lot of these principles that the verse in Colossians talks about that we're focusing on this year, really, they're common things. They're things that we tend to overlook. I know what kindness is. We talk about kindness all the time, but I truly believe that God wants us to look at kindness completely differently. He wants us to look at this and say, I never thought of that before. I never thought of it that way before. And so to have to really dig in and hear that so that we can teach that differently required me to make lots and lots and lots and lots of notes. But you said something which triggered something I had written down, because you said it has to be motivated by love. And I had written down to myself, acts of kindness are motivated by God's love. Those acts of kindness are fingerprints left on the hearts of those who need evidence to believe in that which they cannot see.
Oh, I like that. I like that. We read and we're told that we're supposed to be the hands and feet of Christ, but so many times we don't really know what that means. If it's not a mission project or a service project, we don't really get how you're supposed to be the hands and feet of Christ in the world. But
Right.
I love that idea that we're supposed to leave fingerprints, and not ours, but his.
Because I think, you're talking about the checker at the grocery store and, the server at the restaurant and whoever that is that you encounter every day, those people that do not have Christ in their life, they have that hole and they're yearning for something to touch that spot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when a Christian who can show them kindness that's motivated by God's love and nothing else, no selfish desire, no ambition, no ulterior motive, that when we act in that way, and it might be something as small as a smile, it might be buying them a cup of coffee, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
it touches that void
Mm-hmm.
and it resonates inside of it and it says, this is what you're missing.
Mm-hmm.
And it touches a point nothing else can.
Absolutely. And if you'll indulge me for a minute, I have a great
Please.
story about that. I have a friend who is a missionary in Bolivia, and he has been a pastor for a long, long time, single, never been married. And he has started volunteering in Bolivia with a ministry to reach out to prostitutes, because prostitution is legal in Bolivia. So it's not something that's hidden. It's very apparent in their culture. And his job is to go with the ladies who volunteer, who go in and actually talk with the ladies that work there. And he's just supposed to kind of keep an eye on the volunteers and just sort of be their protector. But there have been a very few times where he's actually had the opportunity to talk to one of the prostitutes, and very, very careful that it's, out in the hallway and it's in view of other people, and very careful to be very respectful to them, first of all, which is something that they never, ever get. I mean, they're bought and sold like pieces of meat, so just to be treated with respect is a huge thing. But he was telling me that he was talking to one of the women one night and asked about her family, because it's very common there for most of the women, they're married and have children, and this is just their job. They work nights. Mm-hmm. And it's a very different thing in the culture. But he asked about her children and how old they were, and showed some interest. And before he left, he said, "You be careful, you take care of yourself tonight." And she just, the look on her face, he said, just totally stunned her. And she just kind of burst into tears. And she's like, nobody has ever said that to me before. And you think about the kind of danger that they face every single night, being beat up. And I mean, the situation's totally out of their control. And for a Christian man, a single Christian man, to make such a point to treat her with respect and kindness, to show an interest and say, be careful tonight, made a huge difference to her.
Yeah. What a beautiful story. And what a great example of how kindness really is the outward expression of the inward change that we have as believers.
Mm-hmm.
For a single man to be in a room that's essentially full of temptation, I'm sure, and not have those worldly thoughts, but have thoughts of kindness and love and compassion.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, is the purest form of evidence of a changed heart.
Absolutely.
That you're then expressing outwardly, just in those simple acts of kindness.
And just taking an interest in her and treating her like a person instead of an object.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story. And, I think kindness is also, we talked about stewardship a few months ago, and kindness really is a form of stewardship. It's taking advantage of the opportunities that God puts in front of you. It's taking advantage of the resources and the giftings even that he's given you so that you can use them to impact the life of another person. And it sounds to me like he was a wonderful steward of that particular opportunity.
Absolutely.
Well, we're really going to talk about, like you said earlier, we want to be the hands and feet of Jesus, but we don't know how to do it. And so we're going to talk about three things that I think are just critical. They're essential. And they are really epiphanies that I've had in the last few months as I've been trying to work this through with God. What do we have to do to really understand kindness and to live it out better? And I feel like these are the three things he's revealed to me. So I'm really excited to share these with you ladies as we really start to dig into what it means to be kind. Okay, so we talked about how there's three different ways that we need to change our behavior
Mhm.
in order for us to be able to exhibit kindness better. And we're going to talk about the first one right now, which is our pace.
Mm.
And I think it's probably the one that we struggle with the most as women, for sure.
No, absolutely. I know it's the one I struggle with the most. Our culture teaches us that being busy is good, and even our church culture teaches us the same thing, that if we're busy for God, then we must be a good Christian, when, in reality, we are so focused on accomplishment that we're not taking the time to take care of the people around us.
Mm-hmm. And everybody suffers. Last month we talked about mercy.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about how mercy is really shown intimately to those people closest to us, our children, our spouse, our friends, our family.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I think that we start to differentiate mercy from kindness. Because kindness is shown to anyone and everyone that God brings across our path.
Right.
Often unexpected, often opportunities that we didn't plan on.
Right.
Whereas we know that we need to plan on our children and our spouse and these people we encounter on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And I read this really great quote once that said, "Do not sacrifice your family on the altar of ministry."
Mm.
And I think mercy and kindness, we've got to make that differentiation right now to say, mercy we pour out on those that are closest to us.
Mm-hmm.
Kindness, we've got to be prepared as an act of obedience. When God puts the opportunity in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
are you going to take it or not?
And let's face it, most of those opportunities are probably initially going to seem like interruptions.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so I wanted to share with you, as we talk about our pace, I can't think of a better place to share this from than this book that I just finished reading by Mark Batterson. And this is called The Wild Goose Chase. And if you haven't read this book, it was published several years ago. I highly recommend you add this to your 2013 reading list. I've already suggested that you take this one home when we're done here, because this is just, it's an excellent, excellent read. It really challenged me. And anything that really, really challenges me, I'm always excited to say, read it. It's a great one. But he has a section in here, and I'm just going to read the entire section. It's a couple pages, so bear with me. But it's called Ministry Happens. And nothing I can find anywhere else speaks to what we're talking about with slowing down the pace of our lives than this passage.
Great.
So it says, "When we do not pace ourselves, we tend to miss divine appointments right and left. In fact, they seem like human interruptions, like you just said. We get so consumed with trying to get where we think God wants us to go that we put spiritual blinders on and miss the goose trails that he wants to take us down. The way that you chase the wild goose, which is the Holy Spirit and how he refers to him in this book, isn't by going faster and faster. The key is slowing down your pace, taking off your sandals, and experiencing God right here, right now." A few years ago, 2 Princeton University psychologists did an experiment that was inspired by a Bible story. Jesus told a story about a traveler who was mugged and left for dead on the side of the road between Jerusalem and Jericho. A priest and a Levite, people who fit the religious profile of Jesus' culture, walked by on the other side of the street. The only one to stop and help was a Samaritan. John Darley and Daniel Baston decided to replicate this story of the Good Samaritan with seminary students. A few variables were introduced into this experiment. The Samaritans were interviewed and asked why they wanted to go into ministry. They were given a wide variety of responses, but the vast majority said that they wanted to go into ministry to help people. Then they were asked to prepare a short sermon, half of them on the story of the Good Samaritan, and the other half on other topics. Finally, they were told to go over to the building on campus and present their sermons. Along the way, the researchers had strategically positioned an actor in the alley to play the part of a man who was mugged in Jesus' story. He was slumped over, he was groaning loud enough for passerbys to hear. The researchers hypothesized that those who went into ministry to help people and those who had just prepared a sermon on the Good Samaritan would be most likely to stop and help. But that was not the case. The reason was the final variable introduced by the researchers. Just before these young preachers left to give their sermon, the researcher looked at his watch and said one of 2 things. To some of them, he said, "Oh my goodness, you're running late. They were expecting you a few minutes ago. You better hurry." And to the others, the researcher said, you're early. They aren't expecting you for a few more minutes. Why don't you just start heading over there? Interested in the results?
Absolutely.
Only 10% of the seminary students who were in a hurry stopped to help,
Wow.
while 63% of those who were not in a hurry stopped to help. In several cases, a seminary student going to give a sermon on the parable of the Good Samaritan literally stepped over the victim as he hurried on his way.
Wow.
These two researchers then concluded that it didn't matter whether someone wanted to help people or whether someone had just read and was preparing to teach on the parable of the Good Samaritan. The only thing that mattered was whether or not they were in a hurry. They concluded the words, "you're late," had the effect of making someone who was ordinarily compassionate into someone who was indignant to suffering. Hurry kills everything, from compassion to creativity. And when you're in a hurry, you don't have time to get out of your routine. No room for spirit-led spontaneity. No time to chase the wild goose. Here's the great irony. The priest and the Levite in the Good Samaritan story were probably on their way to the temple. They were so busy loving God that they didn't take time to love their neighbor. And that is when our routines become counterproductive. Let's be honest. When we get so busy doing ministry that we don't have time for ministry, it's a problem.
Ouch.
I love that. And I love that study and how convicting that is to all of us. Whether you are in full-time ministry or not, we've talked about this time and time again. Every single one of us is in ministry. As a mom, as a wife, as a teacher, as a nurse, whatever your occupation is, that's the mission field you've been called to.
Absolutely.
And if we're so focused on that we miss opportunities to actually do ministry, we're not showing kindness.
No, we've totally missed the point. Just like the preachers who were going to teach on the Good Samaritan but couldn't stop to live it.
Exactly. We have got to slow down the pace of our lives and be willing to make room for interruptions.
Absolutely.
Well, the second thing that we have to change is our perspective. And I had an interesting story. I don't know if I've shared this with you or not. I was at a park recently taking a walk. As I was really seeking some direction for this teaching because I was kind of struggling, and I thought, I'm just going to take a walk and I'm going to talk to God about it and we're going to visit. And this walking trail is about half a mile long, and part of it's kind of up and in the woods and you can't see the road. And as we were talking, he was kind of revealing some of these truths to me and these 3 different P's that we're going to be talking about. And we were just talking about perspective when I rounded this corner and I looked down the hill and I saw a gentleman sitting on a bench. I was a woman walking all by myself, and my first instinct is to get a little nervous.
Sure.
It's, do you turn around? What do I do? And I just thought, no, I'm just going to keep walking. And the closer I got, I thought, okay, am I doing the right thing? And I was kind of praying. And then I started to get, probably 100 feet from him, and he stood up and started to walk towards me. And he was a rather large gentleman, and I got a little nervous then, and I noticed he had a cane, and I'm thinking, okay, not really sure how to approach the situation. But anyway, I prayed again, God, what do I need to do? Just keep walking, Christy. Just keep walking. And as I crossed the road, this man yelled out to me and said, hello, how are you today? With this huge smile on his face. And I said, I'm good. How are you? And it became very apparent in just a few minutes of our conversation that he was probably disabled in some different capacities and was older, probably early 60s, I would say. And he was just out taking a walk, taking a break. And we started visiting. And he started telling me about how he used to live in California and he loved to hike. And we just started asking questions. And literally, Sarah, I stood there on the side of this road and talked to this man for 20 minutes.
Wow.
And at one point, he told me, I collect harmonicas. And I thought, really? I said, do you play the harmonica? And he said, I do. He said, do you want to hear? And he pulls a harmonica out of his pocket. And I have not had the privilege of hearing very many incredibly skilled harmonica players in my day, but he was amazing. He was so talented, and he played for probably 5 minutes for me. And as he sat there and played, I had tears come to my eyes, and almost now as I think about it again, because I just remember God saying to me in that moment, I just needed you to see him the way that I see him. Because all this man wanted today
Wow.
was to be seen and to be heard. And he has this beautiful gift. And I'm sure he very rarely gets the chance to share it because nobody slows down their pace enough to see him for the gifted person that he was. And that 20 minutes out of my day was probably the most invested 20 minutes I'd had in a long time.
Wow, I love that. That reminds me of an article I read somewhere, and I would quote it and give credit if I could, but I just remember a little bit of it. And it was talking about perspective, and it said, you remember that woman that cut you off in traffic and made you so angry? She was a single mom who was racing home to spend a precious few minutes with her children before she tucked them into bed. And remember that tattooed, pierced college student that you kind of shied away from, when they ran into you and it made you angry? Yeah, well, they're really just a scared, worried college student trying to figure out how they're going to make ends meet next semester. And remember that old couple in the mall you got so frustrated with because they were walking so slowly. They just found out this is going to be her last Christmas, and they want to take every minute to enjoy it. And there were just multitudes of examples like that. And I think how often I'm guilty of making that snap judgment, oh, they're slow, or they're this, or they're that. And really all that is a justification for me not to care.
Right.
Because I'm busy. I'm in a hurry.
Right. And kindness is compassionate personified. It's taking God's compassionate spirit that he's put inside of us, and it's putting hands and feet to it.
Right.
And for us to be motivated to be the hands and feet of Jesus, we have to see them first through Jesus' eyes and not our own. And so you've got to slow down your pace, but you've also got to change the way that you start to look at people around you, that you start to look at opportunities that maybe at first seem scary or unsafe, but to continue to pursue forward, obviously with wisdom and discernment, but do that with prayer.
Yes.
And be amazed at the perspective that he changes in you. And I think when you do those two things, when we slow down our pace, when we change our perspective, it sets the stage for the third, the final, and the most important thing.
And what is that?
We have to change our personal activity. Because it does us no good to slow down our pace and to see the need if we're not willing to alter our course to meet the need.
Absolutely. Just like, and in your case with the walk, God told you not to alter your course when your natural inclination was to avoid this person. Right.
Exactly. Another example in Batterson's book, he talks about a friend that was in need of a computer. And so he said, I'm going to be praying about that for you. And he actually was lifting up that request. And he says in his book, and it made me laugh out loud, but he said, I literally felt like God was saying, why are you asking me? You're the one that has an extra computer in your office right now. And I think that's the case a lot of times. So many times we're praying for God to provide a solution for someone, but we're not willing to be the solution ourselves. And he must be sitting there going, really, Christy? Like, all I need is 2 minutes of your time, and I don't want to be that person that makes him go, I want to be that person that makes him smile and go, thank you. He needed that today. Thank you for doing that for me.
That reminds me of the verse in the Bible, and I wish I could remember where it says, if you see a brother in need and you say, be warm and well fed today, but you don't stop to feed him or clothe him or do anything to help his needs, that, what good are you? You haven't helped him, and you haven't done anything in obedience to make God smile.
Right. Kindness is really sacrificing what we want to do for what God needs us to do. And my husband is the king of that. I'm so blown away by my husband. And for those of you who haven't had the chance to meet him yet, he's kind of the man behind LeadHer. But he inspires me.
He's pretty awesome.
When it comes to kindness. I mean, seriously, he is my hero in this department. He really is, because there are a lot of times that I'll call and I'll say, hey, how's your day going? And he's like, well, I haven't even made it to the job site yet. And I'm thinking, you left 3 hours ago and it was like 10 minutes away. What's going on? And he's like, well, I met this guy and he was walking and I wanted to give him a ride. And then when I was, somewhere else, someone needed some help. It never ceases to amaze me. I mean, talk about a wild goose chase.
Mm-hmm.
My husband chases things left and right. And it just amazes me. He'll chase storms, and when tornadoes have hit, he'll drop jobs for weeks at a time to go help people. And he just has that compassionate heart that he is such an example to me of living and being those hands and feet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if more of us were like that,
Mm-hmm.
willing to sacrifice our plans,
Our agendas.
right, for his opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
this world would look amazingly different.
Absolutely. That is a good lesson.
Yeah. One of the verses in the Bible that I think convicts me the most is Ephesians 4:32. And it says, be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. I mean, you want a gut check? Read that to yourself a couple times every single day.
Mm-hmm.
But this verse reminds me, Sarah, that kindness is really nothing more than obedience in action. Have you ever heard of a phrase called kindness fatigue or compassion fatigue?
Compassion fatigue.
You ever heard of that?
Oh, absolutely.
I was thinking about that recently. I had read an article about it, just talking about how oftentimes we just go numb, to the needs around us.
Mm-hmm.
And it hurts my heart to think about that and to know that we've all been guilty of it, myself included.
Mm-hmm.
And I know if it hurts my heart, how must that make God's heart feel? Because he never suffers from compassion fatigue,
Right.
ever. He feels every hurt. And I started to think about that. I started to pray about that. And I came across 2 Thessalonians 3:13,
Mm-hmm.
where the Bible tells us, as for you, brothers and sisters, do not grow weary in doing good. And the thought that came to me, we've been talking about the wardrobe of a LeadHer, and last month we talked about how it's accessory pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about how mercy was kind of like our undergarments.
Mm-hmm.
I think kindness and compassion, it's really more about the gloves of kindness.
I like that.
Because I think our hands are often what we're using to be compassionate and to be kind. But this is the thought that came to me. I felt like, as I was thinking that through, I felt like God just whispered to me, but remember and remind them that our fingers were made to show kindness, not to keep score.
Oh, I like that.
Kindness is not a game.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say, oh, I played yesterday. I did my 5 acts of kindness yesterday. I'm good today. Kindness is an act of worship and obedience. And we're supposed to be willing to do that every single time it comes across our plate.
Mm-hmm. And I think about the times that I've been guilty of compassion fatigue. It's, I find myself crying out to God. It's like, please, no more. I have nothing left. I can't deal with this right now. And it's always times when I'm trying to do it for myself and times that I'm not staying connected to God because I'm so busy for God that I don't take the time to be with God.
Right.
And if I don't stay connected with God, then I do run out.
Yeah.
My compassion bucket isn't that big
Right.
if I don't stay connected to God.
Which brings back what we talked about last month when we talked about manna of mercy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's the same thing. You have to be connected to the heart of God every day
Mm-hmm.
so that you can be motivated to act on behalf of the heart of God and be the hands and feet of Jesus and being kind.
Mm-hmm. Because I think what we're really doing is we're not pouring out our kindness. As human beings,
Yes.
we are innately selfish, and anything that is inconvenient angers us frequently. So
Right.
it's not my kindness I need to pour out, because
Right.
my kindness runs out real quick.
Right.
If I'm tired, if I'm stressed, if I'm
If you're in a
busy,
hurry.
if I'm in a hurry, if I feel under a lot of pressure to get a lot of things done in a short amount of time, if I'm not sleeping, the list goes on and on.
Right.
My kindness runs out really quick. I've got a thimble full on my own. but God has an endless ocean of it.
Yeah.
And if I'm not staying connected to be that pipeline from the ocean,
Right.
I can't do it.
Right. Exactly. You know, we're talking about this correlation to fashion. And at the beginning, I told you that quote that just talked about how fashion is kind of this outward expression of who we are. And in a world where fashion is both courageous, sometimes it's a little wild and crazy.
That's a nice word for it,
But
courageous.
it's often contagious too. You know, you see these fashion trends, and one of the greatest compliments that you can get is to have people, copy what you wear, copy your hairstyle or how you dress. I think as Christians, we've got to strive to make the wardrobe of Christ courageous and contagious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's got to start with this kindness piece, because kindness is probably the most contagious piece of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And so my challenge for you this month, my challenge for me, my challenge for you this month,
Mm-hmm.
is that we be courageous so that we can be contagious, and we stop being a contradiction. Because an unkind Christian is simply that. It is a contradiction in terms,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a contradiction in what we've been called to be.
Absolutely.
So I challenge you this month, ladies. I challenge you right now in your groups to break out and talk about how can you be courageous? How can you be courageous in slowing down the pace of your life? Because let's face it, people are going to look at you and go, "You're going to what? You're going to take an entire day? You're going to take an hour? You're going to slow down? You're going to say no to things?" In this society, saying no is frowned upon.
Mm-hmm.
But I think being willing to say no so that you can say yes to other things and have that flexibility, that's courageous.
Absolutely.
I think changing your perspective and how you look at the world, the people, the opportunities, that's courageous and quickly becomes contagious. And when people see your personal activity level changing, it's going to make them evaluate their own.
Mm-hmm.
So this month, LeadHers, be aware of the fact that leadership in its purest form is an intentional example.
I like that.
Because we are all an example, whether we mean to be or not, good or bad, happy, ugly, beautiful or not, we are all an example every day to somebody. But really, to be a leader, leadership is understanding that your example is important and being it with intention.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's the heart of LeadHer, is being intentional with our influence, which you're right. It starts with the example that we set and being intentional about that.
Yes. So break out in your groups right now, ladies. I want you to talk about this. This is a big topic.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I'm sure will spark some big discussions in our chapters across the country, and I'm excited to hear about those discussions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to see the fruits of this growth in our lives in these areas, in our chapters, in these communities. But really, just be on the lookout this month for opportunities for you to slow your pace, change your perspective, and alter your personal activity.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We'll see you next month, LeadHers. Bye-bye.
Bye.